Hello and welcome to World Talks. My name is Jakub Jaworowski and we're recording in Sopot, a beautiful Polish town at Poland's Baltic coast, where European Financial Congress, a gathering of top financial executives from all around the country, is taking place. And this year, Ukraine is one of the major topics of the conference. And on that team, I have a special guest in my studio, Jakub Jaworowski, who is a member of the management board at Polish Development Bank, or BGK, and former Polish State Assets Minister. Hello, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Good afternoon. Great to be with you here.
So there is like a separate track, the number of discussions on Ukraine, because there is an understanding that when it comes to doing business in Ukraine or doing reconstruction, in some time in the future, finance sector is going to be crucial. Can you explain? Can you shed some light on this matter? Why is financial sector so crucial to doing business in Ukraine and potential reconstruction efforts in the future?
As you mentioned, we have a special track this year during the conference on Ukraine, and actually it's interesting to see that we had two different panels, how to do business during the war and how to do it after the war, because these are two very distinct situations. In terms of rebuilding, I think the very catchy phrase is 3B, building back better. And the idea is that Ukraine needs roughly $800 billion to build back better. And it's
I've heard that phrase before, right?
It is. You know, for better or worse, it's a
acronyms are reusable.
Yeah, it's one of those consulting, terms that is often used. But yes, and it's a huge amount of money that the Ukrainian financial sector won't be able to come up with. So there is a huge need for foreign capital to plug in the difference, right? So there's been a lot of discussion about that. But at the same time, we still want and have to do business during the war to support the Ukrainian economy. And we at Bank Gospodarstwa Krajowego, as you said, Poland's Development Bank, are doing just that, and in many different shapes or forms. Number one, we act as a commercial lender. There is around 1,100 Polish businesses operating still in Ukraine.
Okay.
They've generated around 10 billion zlotys, which is roughly 2.2 billion euros in revenues just like last year, which was, by the way, an increase compared to the previous year by 20%. So the Polish business is growing there.
The Polish business has grown 1/5.
Yeah, exactly. And so we are supporting them with means to conduct trade and conduct business in Ukraine. We are providing loans, we are providing letters of credit for export and import transactions. So this is...
Because let me get this straight. Let's just say that I'm running a company that is already operating in Ukraine. If I go to an ordinary commercial bank and tell them, listen guys, I need a loan to develop my business in Ukraine, the answer I will receive is hard no.
It's
probably
difficult. It's difficult. Like in banking, we operate every day with risks, and there are different kinds of risks which need to be mitigated and then compared to the risk reward, right, of the project. So then, if we have such a huge risk as war risk, it's very, very difficult to have a good coverage of it within the realm of the private sector. So this is where we come in.
So probably at the ordinary commercial bank, I would hear, no, sir.
No, thank you.
And then you guys step in.
We step in, but also other international financial institutions, they step in to support. And there is a number of ways in which we do it. We provide war insurance, and we provide guarantees, right? And in Poland, we created with other development agencies, there is 6 of them in Poland, we created what we call Team Poland, which is a one-stop shop for businesses to come to learn what tools we have to support them in Ukraine, but it also in other international markets. And KUKE, which is Polish Export Credit Agency, is one of the best performing in Ukraine. And then we jointly provide those guarantees so that companies can get financing in the private market, but it is supported by guarantees, and therefore it is doable for everyone involved.
Okay. So as you said, 1,100 companies doing business still in Ukraine. I've heard from some sources that there are actually companies who well, you've mentioned that the business is growing, but I've heard about cases of companies actually establishing like a new greenfield investments over there. So it's still possible. It's still possible to grow, not in terms of volume, but also in terms of how big your base of operations in Ukraine actually is. And when you talk with Polish businesses operating in Ukraine, what is their experience? How do they describe the situation in the country? Well, of course, we know it's war, but
you know, the paradoxical situation is that when you speak to the businessmen, businesswomen who are already in Ukraine, they are slightly less stressed about operating in Ukraine compared with those businesses that aren't there yet.
Okay.
I don't know how it works. Maybe they just got used to the risks, but they manage, and judging by the results that they are achieving, they are managing it quite well.
Okay. Let's now talk about the reconstruction of Ukraine. As you said, it's going to be a huge financial undertaking. The figure you gave, $800 billion / euros, it's a very similar number. Isn't it going to be a little bit less? Because this number, like the World Bank estimates, they also include the occupied territories of Ukraine. So depending on whether they stay with Russia or they go back to Ukraine, there's going to be some amount that needs to be subtracted from this, right?
Mm-hmm. Look, I wouldn't like to go into this whataboutism, right? But one thing is certain, it's going to be an exceedingly large sum of money, which will not be provided by the Ukrainian financial markets on its own. So there's definitely going to be needed an influx of foreign capital, be it in the form of equity or debt, right? And it's not going to be easy.
Sure.
There is multiple challenges. So our discussion here was aimed at jointly thinking between within the financial community, commercial banks, IFIs, Ukrainian Central Bank, Polish regulator, Ukrainian regulator, and so on, to how to create an environment so that when day zero comes, everyone is ready to deploy this capital as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that you already have all the instruments in place you will need in this post-war future for Ukraine?
I think we have many instruments that we will be able to deploy. There is a question of, there is always this risk. Once this risk goes down, we'll be able to deploy it at scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And number two, there needs to be demand, right? Because
sure.
we are financial institutions. We are, in a way, actively, but still waiting for projects to come to us and say, okay, I want to finance this or I want to finance that. And in many sectors, many businesses are still quite reluctant to invest in Ukraine. But it will definitely change the moments the guns go silent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you talk with Polish companies, executives of companies that are not yet present in Ukraine, what fears do they have? Because we've been hearing some chatter about people who tried to do business in Ukraine like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and they've encountered some problems, and this experience, it made them wary of doing business in Ukraine again. So are the Polish business communities sharing those thoughts with you, flagging those risks?
When we speak to Polish business people, I think two risks come to the fore. One is obviously the war risk, but then the second one is around the rule of law and corruption, right? Mm-hmm. This perception of Ukraine is very entrenched, right? And one needs to see it also in a certain context. Number one, Ukraine is on an improvement trajectory in terms of corruption. It's still a huge challenge. But on the other hand, the government acknowledges it and is working on it. But we have to also remember that the government is working within a wartime situation, where everything is much more difficult, by multiply, right? So this challenge is absolutely there, and it makes things difficult. But when we speak to our Ukrainian partners, they are fully aware of it and they are committed to work on it.
Okay. Jakub Jaworowski, member of the management board at Polish Development Bank, or BGK, and former State's Assets Minister. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to the studio. And this was World Talks from European Financial Congress here in Sopot. My name is Jakub Jaworowski, and stay tuned for more of our coverage from EFC. Goodbye.